I was at I was at Miramar College yesterday to meet with a couple of classes, a few classes actually, and I guess I should say like boo, hiss, Miramar, but it doesn't work that way. Y'all don't care. Neither do they. And I spoke for 3 hours. So today I'm going to go for 4. So I hope you're comfortable. I hope the temperature's good. I'm going to give you about 20 minutes, right? That's good enough. I'm going to give you 20 minutes, which will most likely work like this. I'm going to talk. Most of it's rambling. Some of it's going to be some bad jokes. Hopefully you'll indulge me by laughing anyway, and then at 20 minutes, Sasha will signal me and I will just stop. And wherever I am, that's what I do. So anyway, I'll get started. It's amazing to see so many people in here. There's a chair right here. If anybody would like to claim it, or I might. If you're standing in the back, could you just do me like a favor and just sort of like have an awareness of what's behind you? So as you like decide to make yourselves comfortable and lean up against the wall, just make sure that there's not an artwork that you're rubbing your beautiful face all over. So I'll get started. My name is David Willburn. I am from Texas. I grew up in Texas. I was born in Fort Stockton, Texas, which is near-ish the Big Bend area of Texas, which is that bottom dip at the bottom of the state. Not the very bottom, not the little point, but the dip just above it. It sort of goes like this, and that's formed by what body of water? The what? The Rio Grande. Right. Thank you. The Rio Grande. And so I was born in Fort Stockton, nearish that. When I was 3 years old, I moved with my family to Amarillo, Texas, which is at the very top of Texas in what we call the Panhandle. That's the square part. Because my father worked for the railroad. He worked for Santa Fe Railway, which is no longer around. They've merged, I believe, with Burlington Northern, another railway. Mostly freight. That's what they moved and continue to move. Sometimes people, but mostly freight. Including all of our furniture, all of our belongings. And we moved up there when I was 3. And I lived there for about 10 years until my parents divorced. My dad left home, the jerk. And then I moved with my mother and my brother, who's a year younger than me, down to Lubbock, Texas, which is in the very center, kind of at the very center of Texas. Very flat, boring, sort of minimalist landscape. If you've ever seen a minimalist painting, like a Mark Rothko, who's not quite minimalist, he's more of a color-field painter, but it's like color, line, color. That was Lubbock, Texas. And that's why many of my friends today who have been to Lubbock say, well, now I get it. I know why you're an artist, because you literally had to create your own environment. You create your own landscapes. Maybe that's true. I left Lubbock, though, when I was 18. I met a guy who was a student at Texas Tech University, a great school in Lubbock. He was a psych major, and he was graduating, and we met, and we fell in love, and he was headed back to Dallas, and I went with him because I was like, this is my ticket out of Lubbock, Texas. And so thank you, Scott, for getting me out of Lubbock, Texas. I'm going to say that to the camera. And so I went there with him, and I started working at Target, stocking back-to-school supplies. Did someone applaud? I thought I heard applause for Target. Yay, Target. Yay, job. And so I started working at Target, stocking back-to-school supplies, and a woman that I worked with, her name was Vicky, literally saved my life because I had no college plans whatsoever. And she came to me and said, hey, David, I'm going to Eastfield College tomorrow to register for classes. You're coming with me. And I was like, no, I don't think so. Like stocking a pencil. I think I'm good. Thanks, Vicky. And she was like, no, David, you're coming with me. And so I was like, okay, they're not going to want me. So I went there, I registered, I enrolled, I took some tests. I realized how very, very bad at math I was. And I had to basically start over. on my math, starting at it was like a 9th grade level. It was that bad. But I'm telling you that because it was so wonderful that, that they let me in, that they let me become a college student despite the fact that there were clearly some gaps in my education, despite the fact that I clearly was not what we in academia like to call college ready. Like that's actually such a thing, and I don't really know what it means, and I've been teaching college for almost 15 years now. That's all to say, I know you. I know you. I know Palomar College. I know community college. I know 2-year academic institutions, and I believe in them, and I believe in the transformative power of this kind of place and this kind of environment, and sitting out here getting to listen to art superstars like myself. And so it's exciting. It's always exciting to stand in front of my own students, and especially exciting to stand in front of somebody else's students. And just talk and tell stories, and eventually get to the point of your being here, which is my work. I live in Texas. I live in Fort Worth, Texas, with my husband, whose also name is David. Sorry, Scott, you've been out of the picture for a long time. Thanks for getting me to North Texas. But I live with my husband, David, and our 2 dogs. My studio is in my home. I went to grad school in Vermont at a tiny, tiny private institution called Vermont College of Fine Arts. They had a very sort of craft orientation, handicraft, like this kind of stuff, working with needle and thread and collage and handmade paper and photography, but not the kind of photography that you and I are taking today, but the kind of photography that requires chemicals that are kind of toxic and getting things wet and dirty and alternative processes. And so I was very grateful for that experience. And then I ended up back in North Texas after Vermont College of Fine Arts. 2 days, literally 2 days after I walked across the stage and received my diploma, I got a phone call from a former professor at Eastfield College saying, "Hey, David, we need someone to teach 6 art appreciation classes here at Eastfield College. You want the job?" And I had no idea what that meant. I had never taken art appreciation as a student. And I was like, sure, because that sounds like money. And I took them, and I had to invent them as I went along. But I walked across the stage and got a full-time job, which is unheard of. I mean, ask around. I'm so lucky that this accidentally happened to me, because you just don't do that. You don't walk across the stage and get a full-time academic teaching appointment. That turned into a permanent position. I applied for it, competed with all of my friends to keep my own job, and I got it, and I kept it. So I often tell my friends and my students, like, if you stick around at Eastfield College long enough, we'll just start to pay you, because I feel like that's what happened. I started working with fibers, with fabric, with needle and thread, with hand dyeing materials, sometimes my own clothing that I would cut up into pieces and stitch together into larger panels. Ultimately, though, I started working almost exclusively with muslin, the fabric. Because I love the fabric. I love the way it looks. I love the weight of it. I love the fact that you can see, when you look closely at a piece of muslin, you can see, it's like you can see the history of the making of this very ancient fabric. You can see like little remnants of this, I guess, the seed holes in the fibers of the weave, which I think is fantastic. It's like it's telling its own story of where it came from. And I am using the fabric along with some other materials to tell a story about myself and about, in many ways, where I came from and who I am and why I am who I am. So anyway, So I started using embroidery, late grad school, and I started making pretty straightforward drawings. I refer to all of these as drawings because of the very strong linear element. I'm just making a drawing rather than with a pen and ink or a stick of charcoal or even a paintbrush with watercolor. I am using a needle and thread to make the same kind of line that you would make in your sketchbook with a pencil. I like it because all of my work, I like embroidery because all of my work is about my home. It's about domesticity. It is about the act of living and operating daily in a home environment, whether it's my home or whether it's your home. But it just so happens that I'm in my own space, and so I am using my work to document the use of that space, the history of that space, and the daily rituals of that space, the way that my husband and I, the way that our two dogs occupy spaces. So I'll just tell you about what you're looking at and why they look the way they do. So I said I started out by making pretty straightforward drawings of like a dining table or the corner of a sofa. If you go to my website, you can actually see some of these earlier images. There's a drawing, it's one of my favorites, on a gray felt panel of my husband. It's sort of shot at an awkward angle, like I'm up here looking down at him, and he's sitting in the sofa with his hand on the back of our dog, our oldest of two dogs, named Tao. And it's unfinished, the drawing is, because I think that in many ways I'm unfinished, or we are unfinished, or you are unfinished, or this sort of act of living, thinking, breathing, occupying a house, having stuff in the house. It's like always in this state of a kind of flux. It's always moving, it's always changing. And so for that reason, many of these early drawings are unfinished, as though they're not complete, or as though they are in some sort of undergoing an act of erasure, like I made the drawing and then I went back somehow and either pulled out threads or erased the thread drawing. Not only are they unfinished, but the threads are left, like in this one, the threads are left to hang, as though we, as viewers, are witnessing the unfinishing of the work, as we're witnessing it like unraveling like a bad sweater, you know, when you pull the string and it just unmakes itself, or you unmake it as you pull. Eventually, though, I became less interested in the objects themselves that I was recording. I became less interested in making documentary images of the chairs and the lamps and the furniture and the things that we engaged with on a regular basis. And I became more interested in the subjectivity of these objects, or in the essence. Like, it's less about how the thing looks, because that felt too specific, and it became more about how I feel about that thing, you know, which is really the basic difference or definition of objective and subjective. Objective is like the object. It's about the facts. It's about what we literally see before us. And subjective is like an emotional response to the object, which is something that you'll encounter often when you're looking at works of art. You're going to hear people talk about, and you yourself will talk about, like, you know, an objective response versus a subjective, or objective reading versus subjective reading. So I became more interested in the subjective element, or the essence of the objects. So I started to abstract away the information, and I started to, using a computer, I started to digitally remove evidence of what the object is or what the object used to be, to reduce it to what I hope, what I think of as an interesting composition of formal elements like line, shape, color, texture or principles like pattern or balance. And that felt very liberating. Once I removed the objectness, once I removed the sofa or the coffee pot or the dog or the human, it was like I could suddenly allow you, the viewer, into the work. It was no longer specifically about me and stuff. Instead, it became about other things that you could step into, other things that you might find interesting. I'm interested in I guess you could call it geometric abstraction. There's a lot of geometric elements in my work. That is a result of the abstracting process that I use a computer for. Let's see, what else? I'm interested in...
3-minute warning.
Okay, thank you. Wow. I'm interested in a kind of, creating or documenting a kind of mapping. I look at my work and think of them, these pieces, as kind of maps or kind of landscapes, as though they're like you're looking at a topographical map or environment. In some examples, like these two right here, these are actually titled Mapping, Mapping 1 and Mapping 2, because I'm actually tracing with thread, I'm tracing the lines created by the wrinkles in the fabric. So I take the piece of fabric and I will wad it up, and then I will draw the lines created by those wrinkles, creating these sort of interesting clusters. The clusters of lines create interesting shapes. And then I flatten the fabric back out. I wet it, I iron it, removing all the wrinkles, removing evidence of those original lines, and then I'll add some sort of paint element. I create paint skins, which is just pouring acrylic paint onto a sheet of plastic. If you haven't done this, you should try it. It's really amazing. You can make great collages with acrylic paint skins. You pour the paint on a piece of plastic and you let it dry, usually overnight, and then you can peel it off. And it's like you have this sheet of pigmented plastic that you can then take a pair of scissors and cut into any shape, and you can build up surfaces and layer colors together. And it can be a lot of fun. So that's what's happening here. That's what's happening here. This paint was a little bit thicker. This paint had an additive that I added to it so that it would have a nice flatness to it with no bubbles. Let's see, what else? I feel like I'm kind of rambling now. All of these circular pieces that you see around the room are self-portraits, or I think of them as self-portraits for two reasons. Reason number one, I'm using a mirror on a stick to take selfies. So I'm holding a mirror and I move around my house and I take a picture of my reflection, which is mostly my phone, if you can imagine, and then some information about the environment. So I'm around me. So I'm still documenting part of my home, but I'm now adding a couple of other layers. I'm adding the layer of the digital device used to make the documentation. I'm adding the layer of my head that you can see around that digital device. I'm also adding a sort of metaphorical layer of the reflection, of looking at myself in the mirror, presenting myself and my environment in the mirror, and then sort of projecting that back out to you, but it's all been abstracted. Some of these pieces back here, these three pieces, these hanging panels with various devices on top of them, they're titled In My Room, which is a pretty literal reference to my process of making these drawings, moving around the house from room to room, documenting myself literally in my room or in my rooms. Thank you. This was great. This was really, really good. Thank you so much.